Anne Ross is a very unusual lady. You don't run across too many Anne Rosses in a lifetime.
She helped me do things that no other person did in the city of Winnipeg.
She doesn't believe in no. If she means this is going to happen, then she makes sure it happens. She does, honestly.
She had oceans of compassion. She had dogged determination. And when she saw a need, she would get blood out of a stone.
They knew instinctively that I cared. I mean, you know, this word cared is getting so shop-worn that it kills me. But caring is caring.
Anne Ross has been caring for other people for well over half a century. As a nurse, a counselor, health activist, relentless advocate for the rights of the disadvantaged. Believing that health cannot be separated from social and economic circumstances, her approach, always unconventional and often controversial, is based first and foremost on the needs of the people she serves. This is the Mount Carmel Clinic, built in 1926 by the Winnipeg Jewish community to provide free care for the flood of immigrants filling the city's north end. The Second World War brought increased prosperity, and by the early 40s, only a handful of Jewish patients were attending the clinic. By 1948, the building itself was decrepit, and there were only 2 staff, a bookkeeper and an X-ray technician. Legally, the board had to have a registered nurse to keep operating, so they let the technician go and hired Anne Ross. The problem was that funding was dependent upon running a school for X-ray technicians.
They said to me, you know, you have to teach. Yeah, we have a school of X-ray, you have to teach. I said, you must be kidding. There's a secretary there, and he spoke on behalf of the board. And I said, he says, well, you have to. He says, we need a nurse because we can't function without a nurse. We also need an X-ray technician, and we can't afford her. We also need a lab technician, and we can't afford her either. So you be all 3. I says, I'm very flattered, but how? Anyway, there was a gentleman who used to come and look at our old X-ray machine, hoping to sell us a new one. And he was an X-ray technician. I says, teach me.
Anne passed her exams and was able to teach the young students, but there were still no patients.
I had to make up my mind whether I'll stay there. You know, I asked myself the question, what am I doing here? There's nobody. You know, I was supposed to be head nurse. Of what? And I decided to go out into the streets near the clinic and walk. And I saw these kids with their pussy ears and their nakedness and their indifference by parents and drunkenness and blows rained on them and loneliness and the whole works.
Anne began to approach the mothers for permission to tend to their children.
Fortunately, I wore my uniform. She said, you nurse, eh? And I said, yes, I'm a nurse. I'm a good mother. You know, take my children. I said, no, I won't take your children. I just want to look after them.
Anne's community outreach produced results, and soon there was no shortage of patients.
It was a conundrum. When I got patients, I had no doctors. Remember, no Medicare. You know, poor people waited until they were good and sick before they went into, and then they went to the OPDs and sat and waited for hours. Ours was the first walk-in clinic. Come. So it was a process. I got patients and I got doctors. Then patients, you know, started to tell their neighbors. But I think what really started something going was the day hospital.
Anne saw that many children were requiring hospitalization for minor injuries and illnesses, more from the lack of proper care at home than from the illness itself.
Mrs. Ross got into her head that if we kept these children during the day and looked after them, we could take them back home in the evenings and pick them up again tomorrow. And so we'd be making them well, but saving a hospital bed. The children were brought in for medical reasons, emotional reasons, social reasons. They were covered with sores. Some of them, their scalps were just literally going, just sores, and their bodies, sometimes they look like polka dot skins. So they came, and I cared for them.
Climb in, John Paul. Climb in, Thelma. Climb in, Daddy. He said, it's fun to ride in the school bus.
We had just one car, an old car, which we picked up the children from their homes in this car. Any child who needed attention was taken in. We went up to 31, from babies to school age. So the first thing we did was to give them a bath. 31 baths you had to give. We fed them. Then medications were given, treatments were given. We were like home. You treat the children like you treat them at home.
Anne made sure that parents were involved in the day hospital as much as possible, providing them with an opportunity to learn basic health care for their children.
When I saw something that needed to be done for people, I tried to help. In the process, things grew. And while the day hospital, we were able to get the mothers to come. It just upset me when I saw these women coming in with 4 preschoolers and not able to get birth control. Because while it was illegal, if you went to your own private doctor, it was available. But if you went to the big hospitals in the outpatient department, it was the same doctor working there would not give it to them because there was a rule. When I raised it at board level, I remember one lawyer sitting there and he says, you know, Anne, it's illegal. You're liable to go to jail. And, you know, with my usual airiness, I said, so you are a big shot, you can bail me out, I'm sure. Then I went on talking. Never even occurred to me that really that was a reality, that I could have gone to jail.
Anne quietly opened Winnipeg's first public birth control clinic, and no one went to jail. In fact, the clinic exploded with patients, and as more patients arrived, Anne produced a constant stream of innovative programs to suit their various needs: antenatal care, postnatal care, blood pressure clinics, foot clinics.
Every program which we started was based on a need that existed in the community, which I assessed as a result of home visits or people who talked to me and say, you know, Anne, this is, like the nurses would say, you know, Anne, the children need dental work.
As each program got off the ground, she would begin to research the next.
The whole concept at the clinic is comprehensive, integrated care.
I liked Anne's idea of integration. She would bring the doctors together, she would bring the nurses together, she would bring pharmacists together, social workers, nurses' aid, anything that she thought was necessary in order to fulfill her program into one building, into one unit.
All the factors which impact negatively on that person should be dealt with in some way or other. And the follow-up going into the home is crucial. So, community, clinic, clinic, community. People feel comfortable here. They're treated with dignity, with respect, with consideration, with concern. And the staff really cares about people. They really care about them, and people respond.
And you're going to be able to keep that appointment?
Well, I think so.
That's good.
Yeah.
If you can't, you let me know.
All right.
You phone me and let me know.
Yeah.
Because it's very important.
Yeah.
I'm quite concerned about your eyes.
A large number of the clinic patients were Aboriginal.
I think the Aboriginal people began to recognize that the Mount Carmel Clinic was there to help them, to assist them for medical purposes, for just about everything, because they developed a good rapport with the Mount Carmel Clinic, and they're still doing today. I don't think Mount Carmel has ever turned any of our people away.
And I knew as little as anybody about Aboriginals, believe me. However, to me, there were people who are hurting. To me, there were people that were silently hurting. And that I couldn't take, you know. People in silence and hurting and not being able to do anything about it. I just, once again, I reacted to their needs. And I did what I did.
Like if I was hungry, I would eat. If I needed some help with a problem, I would call Mount Carmel Clinic.
Anne's first loyalties were always to the children and their families, and in this she often went against the currents of the time. In the 1950s, the Children's Aid Society commonly apprehended children from parents who, they felt, were providing inadequate care.
We talk about advocacy. How many times did I have to really do battle with Children's Aid, with welfare, on behalf of some of the people who couldn't fight for themselves, who couldn't speak up for themselves? We said that the most important single thing is to make sure that families stay together.
She felt that a family unit was more important than children being apprehended. If things could be discussed or worked out, I think that was her thought, that should be done prior to apprehension.
Nobody could apprehend a child on our premises. I did not want the people who come here to associate us with apprehension. We were here in the business of trying to keep children at home by working with them through the day nursery, through the day hospital, through home visits, through working with them, mothers, and trying to teach them basically how to bond with their children.
She puts the needs of the patient or the client first, and if those needs don't fit with what the system demands, then she'll work to change the system.
I find so much injustice, stupid stuff, you know, people to enhance their own position, power. People get so taken with power. I don't understand it all.
Mrs. Ross, she was always there to help. You just had to tell her. And she was after fighting for somebody's right. Yes, she did. She fought for the underprivileged.
I really think from day one, well, day two, I was a rebel.
Anne was born in Russia, the youngest of 4 children. When she was very young, her father traveled to Canada and was cut off from the family for many years.
I remember starving. I remember going out into the field and gathering kernels after the peasants had taken in their grain. I never felt deprived. I was surrounded by love.
In 1922, like many other Jewish families, Anne's family applied to emigrate from Russia, and they finally made their way to Canada.
It was a very worrisome time for me because I was surrounded by a language that was foreign to me. But it didn't last long. I picked it up. I don't know from where. I played baseball almost immediately, and I skipped grades, and before I knew it, I was in grade 6, and with the rest of the kids the same age.
In the evenings after grade school, Anne attended the Jewish Parrott School.
It teachers were absolutely phenomenal. They taught us to think for ourselves. They taught us to look around us and be a responsible citizen. Justice was a great thing with them, that the poor should be helped. The person that influenced me more than anyone else was my sister Gitel. To me, she was like a second mother. She died, I think, in 28. And I still, at times, miss her. Just imagine all these years. She was always encouraging me to make something of myself. You have to be independent. And the kind of profession you choose, Hanala, she called me, must be service to humanity.
Anne chose the nursing profession and started her training.
I was very difficult to handle. I don't think I took very kindly to being in at 10 o'clock, to being told, you do as you are told. Don't ask any questions. Nurses get their caps after 6 months. 59 girls got their caps. Anne Ross didn't, Anne Glass didn't. And believe you me, it was the most horrible period of my young life to think that they wouldn't let me become a nurse.
Anne knew when it was wiser not to play the rebel and did, after all, get her nurse's cap.
Leon Tajio?
She began as head nurse of a clinic with virtually no patients. But within 20 years, Anne was executive director of a thriving community clinic, seeing up to 120 patients a day. They were literally bursting at the seams.
We had a very small waiting room. It used to be just full of patients all the time. And the patients would be sitting in the staircase and all over, whatever place they could find to sit down, they would do that.
It was a very happy bedlam, but it was an organized bedlam. Things got done, and things happened as they should.
It had a real community feel to it, even a family kind of feeling to it.
Like many of the families it served, the clinic was always short of funds for supplies and equipment, and for staff.
I've had discussions with doctors who had been cornered by mother at parties or in social situations, because we're talking pre-Medicare. We're talking from 1948 to 1967, where the only way you could get doctors is to get them to donate their time. And you want to talk unstoppable. I don't think there was a doctor in the city that was in her range that escaped. She had specialists coming once a week. She had GPs coming regularly. It was very hard to say no to Anne Ross.
And it wasn't only the doctors who found it hard to deal with Anne at times.
She gave her whole life to the patients, and she thought that the nurses should do that. They shouldn't have a life. I told her this one day about sympathy. I said, you know, the way you have sympathy for the patients, you can have it for the nurses. She just wanted everybody to be on the same wavelength as she was, and they would not be. They came to work, and they didn't want to give as much of themselves as she gave. And that was the whole thing. Her whole thing is pushing people. She'll push you and push you because you are supposed to be like her. You can't be like her if you haven't got the same feelings that she has.
I think anybody who has done as much as Anne Ross has done has to be a tough person. When someone says no, they don't stop there. They keep going. And that's the way I look at her. If you think that means that you're a tough boss, then yeah, she's a tough boss.
She just worked at Mount Carmel Clinic and lived at Mount Carmel Clinic. That's what I thought. How did her husband manage? So she tells me he's a very good man, too.
Anne first met Bill Ross at Parrott School. They were married in 1937. They had 2 young children, and when Anne started at the clinic, she made it a priority to find good alternative care for them.
You know, they talk about children suffering with working mothers. I mean, quite the contrary. When she was always there for me when I needed her. There was never a question of that. I mean, even the midst of everything, if she felt that I needed her, or if I was upset, you know, she thought I was upset, it would be, Didi, I think we should go to Eaton's and have lunch.
Mom was a softie with both of us. She was compassionate, she was involved, she was supportive to a degree that I think makes me wonder now as a parent how she ever found the time. My father was concerned with transforming Canadian society. He was concerned with social justice on the world stage, on the national stage. My mother was perhaps more modest and more pragmatic. She was concerned with social justice in her community. Both of them shared values that were virtually identical. They simply had different ideas of the scale of the project that they would devote themselves to.
But also a very loving relationship. I mean, they used to sit and neck on the sofa. I mean...
Horrified us.
Oh, yes. I mean, what teenager or young... I mean, really, teenager. I mean, they'd sit there and Mom would snuggle up to Dad and they'd be sitting there watching TV. The one area that I think Arthur and I ran into a problem with is that unified front, work together. I mean, the whole, you know, children are great at trying to divide and conquer. Nah, didn't work at all. I'm not that dewy-eyed to think that you live together with somebody, and I think it'll be 60 years next June, that, and there aren't issues that have to be dealt with in a relationship. But whatever the issues were, they were dealt with because of the incredible love they had for each other.
If one could say about one's husband, he's my best friend, he is truly my best friend.
We sat around the dinner table, and in addition to all the usual conversation, there would be references to political events, social issues, and of course, in many instances, issues related to the clinic.
I always refer to the clinic as the sort of absent sibling that was always the focus of discussion. And I certainly remember, I don't know if you do, Arthur, that one time that I just blew up at the dinner table and I said, I've had it, you know. Could we have a meal without Mount Carmel Clinic at the dinner table?
Didi, I am very proud of her. She knows that. If you saw her running a meeting, Mount Carmel Clinic, you know, I really, she's very relaxed, and she lets everybody have their say. And when I try to say something, she says, Mother.
No, I never say Mother.
No. Or, you know.
No, I just say, excuse me. When she tries to jump in front of other people. Well, that was one of the deals that we made when I chaired the board.
You were right, you're right.
But you know what? You're just proving our point.
What?
That it all comes back to the clinic, even 3 years later.
It wasn't only in the family that Anne's work provoked discussion. When abortions were legalized, patients asked the clinic for help, and it was soon a public issue.
We told them categorically we do not do abortions. However, our doctors will examine you, ascertain whether or not you are pregnant, and if you are indeed pregnant, then let's sit down and talk about alternatives. I was neither pro-abortion nor anti-abortion. I was doing what I always did. A need existed in the community. Since so many people, so many young, distraught people were coming for help, I felt that counseling was indicated. Because nobody has an abortion easily, carelessly.
With only one hospital performing abortions in Winnipeg, waiting lists were too long for what Anne considered safe. So she referred women to reliable clinics in the U.S. But abortion is a volatile issue, and Anne was soon the object of a vicious attack from Joe Borowski, Minister of Highways.
You said that I was pimping for abortionists in New York. He also said that if these tramps who are coming to the clinic would keep the hot pants on. This is a quote that he made on the air. If they kept their hot pants on, they wouldn't get into that trouble. And maybe they should be spayed, and then they wouldn't get pregnant. Those are his words. I'm just quoting.
It was a very, very difficult time because he was a cabinet minister. He had the forum of the legislature. He had the press at his beck and call, and she was under merciless attack.
And it wasn't an issue attack. I think if it had been strictly an issue attack, it got very personal. I mean, there were things that were said that were extremely personal.
He really took Mrs. Ross for a loop. She didn't deserve what she went through with Joe Borowski. He really, really gave her a hard time.
Very often now, I think leadership is a matter of being politically compromising on issues, or worrying about what's the trade-off here. If I get a certain sector angry at me, maybe I won't get my funding next year, so maybe I'd better adjust to everything. And I took the view that leadership means that very often you have to confront situations, you have to confront institutional thinking, and you have to live with the consequences.
Borowski tried to cut off the clinic's sources of funding because, he said, it was involved in illegal pimping for abortionists.
Overwhelmingly, I think her concern was that the clinic would be damaged, that this was going to be in some way a setback for the clinic. She, at that stage, if I remember correctly, was negotiating, pushing for a new clinic. She was hoping that the government in power would be sympathetic and would come up with funding. And this was an issue which she thought was going to, in some way, be very, very damaging for the clinic itself.
Anne received a lot of support for her position from the local community, and particularly from patients who sent a delegation to talk to the Premier.
The minister was told that he cannot persist in this approach, that the whole cabinet disagrees with him. The patients want him to apologize. He refused. Okay, the Premier said, then you resign. And he resigned. And he ran in our constituency, and he was beaten ignominiously. I love children. And it was because of my love of children that I said, no child should be brought into the world heedlessly, senselessly, unless that child is going to be cared for properly.
In 1976, Anne set up the Anne Ross Day Nursery for children at risk.
I said, look, we have a day hospital, it's working, but we need something more structured. We need something that will address not only the physical needs of the children, but the emotional, the mental, the lacks, and the sort of upgrade them in terms of how to deal with themselves and with their environment. And it took time. The only reason we started this in the 60s, the planning, and the only reason we couldn't really get it going is money. We were always short of money.
The children have to be the focus for her, and everything goes from there.
And if one route doesn't work, then we'll try another.
Yes.
Mom wouldn't consider herself to be an entrepreneur, although at one time, I believe one of her board members who was in the business world said, that, come to me, I'll pay you twice. I'll pay you 3 times. I want you to be an executive in my company. But if she couldn't get funding from government, from the city of Winnipeg or whatever, she would approach private foundations. She would approach service clubs. She would approach anyone who could help. And she left no stone unturned.
Where were you? Oh, that's good. Oh, hey, look at that. Look at that. Do you want to put one? We knew that these kids didn't have enough to eat. We are the only day nursery that has a cook who gave 3 meals a day. We're the only ones who picked people up by bus. I think we were very, very effective. And we know that these children would not have lasted very long at school if it weren't for our early intervention. These are kids of poverty. These are kids of neglect. These are kids of indifference. But these kids are given a chance. That's where it's at.
I was 16 years old when I first went to the clinic. I had dropped out of school I'd probably been out for a couple of years even. Wasn't doing a whole lot, pretty directionless. Ann Ross came out and approached me. After talking for a little while, she asked me if I wanted to work. And I said yes, that I would really like to work.
The project was the pilot for what was to become the Ann Ross Day Nursery. Diane worked alongside members of the community and university students.
They opened up a whole new world to me that I would never have known existed. I knew nothing about higher education. If it hadn't been for them, I certainly wouldn't, I don't think I would have been able to navigate my way into the system in the way that I did. And at each point along the way, I would go back and see Ann, and never really knowing whether she would remember who I was, but really needing to go back and let her know how grateful I was for the opportunity that she gave me.
Ann Ross always saw beyond the immediate health needs of her patients.
Like when she saw the children dressed in their winter clothing, and she said, "Whose children are all these children here?" And I said, "Mine." She goes, "Oh my goodness, are you on the pill?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, I think we better set up an appointment here so you'll get looked after of all these children." You know, the way she talks makes you feel good about doing something like that. And that's really how I became involved, and she told me about the group therapy program.
When they would come to me and say, you know, this is what's happening, my husband's beating me, or my husband's raping me, and stuff like that, finally I said to some of them, hey, let's get together and talk about it as a group. And it was just a simple thing. And they organized it themselves. You know, this one knew this one, this one knew this one. Why don't you get Nellie in? Why don't you get Sally in? Why don't you get Dorothy in? And then some of the men, you know, well, I want to go too.
And sometimes young people would even come too, like the children of the parents that were troubled, they would come.
What we did is instill a dignity. Instill that, hey, you know, you're important.
If there's anything we can learn from Ann, it is to be non-judgmental. Absolutely non-judgmental.
At that time, a lot of teenage mothers were attending the clinic.
The law stated that any doctor or any clinic, I suppose, who knew of an adolescent who was pregnant under the age of 18 had to report it to the child welfare authorities. And when I started working there, I was hearing, well, Mount Carmel Clinic doesn't make those reports, and that's a problem. I phoned Ann, and I identified myself, and I said, you know, I'm just wondering what this is about. Like, you're supposed to make these referrals. And she said, Diane, sometimes families can look after themselves without having established authorities involved. And she said, we're quite capable here of making those decisions. And I said, you know, being a newly educated professional and having the Child Welfare Act in front of me, and I said, but you have to, by law. And she said, well, Diane, think about it. How would you have felt if I had referred you? And so her point was very well taken. And from then on, it just changed my perspective some to understanding it more again from the client's point of view.
Part of the assessment that Ann developed was to then get back into the family setting to see what are the circumstances here within this family. And very often she would find, one, there was unemployment. Two, there may be abuse. There were obviously cases where there was not enough food for the family. And she recognized we then have to see what can the clinic do to be able to help this family along in terms of clothes, in terms of housing, in terms of the ability to maybe find employment in order for the family to function more effectively.
When people would complain to her about living in very bad circumstances, she would actually go and see their home firsthand And then she'd be able to say, like to housing, these people really need an apartment immediately because they're living in such dire circumstances.
Anne started a Mount Carmel Tenants Association to lobby for better housing.
Anne made an enormous contribution to the marginalized peoples in the city. She had oceans of compassion. She had dogged determination. And when she saw a need, she would get blood out of a stone. If there was milk to be found for a mother without, she would get it, come hell or high water.
The very foods which keep children and pregnant mothers healthy when careering up, that's milk, cheese, and other products. So we took up the cudgels. Whenever the milk board sat, I came and said, look, I don't mind the farmers getting their share, but why pass it on to the consumer?
Anne organized a national petition, and with this support went to Ottawa.
I was really very, very disgusted. You know, everybody was glad handing me and saying, you know, you're doing good work, Mrs. Ross, keep it up. But nothing. And finally, I decided to do something about it. And we started talking around the clinic that we should start giving free milk, but we didn't have any money. And to this day, we've never been able to get public funding for that project. It blows my mind, you know, to this day.
People need then to have a champion, one who understands their concerns, okay, and who are prepared to speak on their behalf on a matter of a personal set of principles.
The idea of taking a stand on issues pertaining to health. And what pertains to health? Everything. Now, we promoted, for instance, during the 60s, the idea of teaching young people about sex. Now, oh my God, you know, what is she doing now? I was looked upon as promoting sex, promoting birth control. But I found that it was necessary to sell birth control to the young kids, to promote the idea, if you're going to have sex, be protected for Pete's sake.
Anne was often invited to give her opinions on controversial health issues on local radio.
Then manager said, you know, Anne, you sound pretty good on radio, and how would you like a job? I said, oh, God, no. I said, that's all I need, you know, I don't have enough work to do with the clinic. He said, no, this is from 10 to 12 on Friday evening, and it's not going to hurt your work, etc., etc. I said, well, do I have complete freedom? You know? And he said, of course, you know, whatever. Good evening, this is Ann Ross. May I help you? One of the first questions, after I'd only been there a few days, was a 28-year-old man who was impotent, and he wanted to know what to do. And I was thinking, my God, what do I say to him? You know, impotence has so many manifestations and reasons and so on. So I started asking him questions, you know, what the problem was. So and we had a little discussion over the air, people listening, and I thought, I'm going to get it this time. Nary a word. Nobody said a word. I've got freedom here. And from then on, you know, it was really delightful. I would get a lot of questions from marital problems, but what it really started to be is the teenagers' station. Good evening, this is Ann Ross. May I help you?
Yes, I'm having this problem, and it's like, because I'm going out with this guy.
Go ahead.
He's like my best friend. Well, like she likes him, and he still likes her. I'm going out with him, and then she wants to go out with him still, and like I don't know if I.
How old are you?
I'm 12.
12. Good evening, this is Ann Ross. May I help you?
Yes, sir, Ann Ross.
Mm-hmm. Ann Ross speaking.
I have a very serious problem.
Mm-hmm.
Just back from my girlfriend's house.
Mm-hmm.
And she was at the doctor yesterday. She's 15.
Mm-hmm.
And she's pregnant.
Good evening. This is Ann Ross. May I help you?
Oh, Anne?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you something. Like, I live at home with my dad,
Mm-hmm.
and he drinks a lot. And he's, like, he starts to come into my room,
Mm-hmm.
and he has sex with me
Yeah. When was the last time he had sex with you?
on Thursday night.
Can you come down and see me? Do you know where I am?
Yeah, I think I do.
I have a great compassion and concern and need to say, hey, you don't have to buckle under like that. You can do something about it. I have a need maybe to add something to the well-being. And what am I a nurse for?
For years, Anne schemed, pushed, and bullied for funds for a new facility. And in 1982, the dream of a new clinic finally came true.
Ann Rose had that zoom about her character and her personality that anything could be done with her. Ann Ross, she doesn't believe in no. If she means this is going to happen, then she makes sure it happens. She does, honestly.
We got a call from the Minister of Health, and he said, Anne, I hope you're sitting down because you're going to get the clinic, like $2.25 million or something. And I was sitting down, but I almost fainted. And anyway, we immediately dusted off our old, hi there, how are you?
I don't see you for ages.
Yeah, how are you?
You allowed me.
Oh.
It's my pleasure to see you again.
I hope things are all right with you.
Yeah, you're looking excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you in better shape?
Mount Carmel Clinic.
Today, the Mount Carmel Clinic continues to operate with the philosophy of integrated healthcare that Anne established. On-site pharmacy, laboratory, dental care, x-ray. Outreach programs into the community provide sex education, pre- and postnatal care, parenting programs, counseling and social work, geriatric care. The day hospital is still an important part of the clinic, providing respite for parents and appropriate medical care for the children, while keeping the child at home and avoiding unnecessary hospitalization. In 1985, Anne retired, or at least that was her avowed intention. She learned to play bridge, she traveled, she spent time with her grandchildren. But for Ann Ross, this just wasn't enough.
Play bridge in a senior citizens rules, you know. You have to do this and you have to do that, and you don't have to do that. Why should I? And I think they hate my guts.
She thought she could retire gracefully and fade off into the sunset. Well, she couldn't. And why? Who knows? You know, we get back to the question, what makes Annie run? I don't know, but whatever got her going is still driving her.
She asks that question of me frequently. What keeps me going? Why do I want to do these things? I try to get her to answer her own question. And I'm afraid I'm not too successful, except to say that she is happiest when she is working.
For some of us, old age brings increased poverty, loneliness, isolation. 150 seniors live in this low-income housing block in downtown Winnipeg. They live in small one-room apartments and are increasingly confined by their mental and physical disabilities.
When you take certain debilities and you mix them up with poverty, life isn't a bed of roses. And I thought, in some small way, we could mitigate, we could change that. We could make life a little easier for them.
Anne decided to do something. Her idea was a health clinic situated in the center of the building, at the heart of the problem. She spent 3 years tirelessly lobbying government before she could get the necessary funding.
The health minister who really gave me the money, ultimately, I phoned him, I say, every other day. I didn't always get him, I got his assistant. But I persisted every other day, a phone call.
The AGR clinic has been funded as a pilot project. 7 days a week, nurses provide on-site primary and preventative health care services right in the building. The program is already proving cost-effective, saving precious healthcare dollars otherwise spent on emergency care, doctors' visits, public health nurses, etc. And it doesn't stop there.
What do we mean enhancing the quality of life? What do we mean by it? To me, it means make life livable and enjoying life within one's ability, both physically, emotionally, socially, and economically.
Counseling takes a large amount of our time here. The counseling ranges from counseling for stress, anxiety, anger, to grieving, to the counseling to do with encouraging and comforting people.
I think the first week we were here, we were all both sort of overwhelmed by this. We thought, wow, we have to do everything. Like, there's no, the first day I went out and bought something for somebody, and I thought, this is nursing? And then the more I got into it, I thought, yeah, this is nursing. This is what it's all about. It's about caring about a whole person, about their whole livelihood. Hi, Shirley. I brought you some groceries. How are you? Okay. That's good. You watching TV? No. No? Enjoying your nice comfy chair? That's good.
That's nursing care? I think so. It's caring. Never mind the nursing. It's caring. And that's the name of the game. One of our programs, which we have inaugurated, is that we have birthday parties for all the people who were born on a particular month. At one of the birthday parties several months ago, after it was all over, this gentleman whom I hadn't met yet and haven't seen him, sat and tears were rolling down his eyes. He's a big, hefty man. And I walked up and I sat down. I says, what's the matter? Anything hurt you? He says, no. He said, this is such a beautiful invitation. I've never been to a birthday party of my own, ever. He was 76. Yeah, come on, we sing. Come on, John.
Good health and longer life. There
you know my attitude about age. Age is irrelevant, it's unimportant, it's what you are and the type of person that you are. If as we go along, if I change my mind about revealing my age, then I will reveal something that half of Winnipeg really knows, and I kid myself in thinking they don't know.
Anne no longer talks of retirement. A published author, she has just finished one book, Seniors to Seniors, and started another for teenage parents. She is frustrated not to find publishers for her book on the Mount Carmel Clinic.
It talks about all of the things that the research is now telling us that are pertinent to people's health. And there's significant lessons, I think, that we can all learn from this. We need to have this book published.
Anne lobbies government again. This time it's a housing and education project for teenage mothers.
She's a feisty lady, and she won't take no. If she believes in something, she's going to fight for it and go after it and get it. And in the end, she always has accomplished her goal.
With the recent healthcare crisis, Anne worries that despite statistics proving it is saving the government thousands of dollars, funding for her AGR Seniors Clinic will be cut. She tackles Health Minister James McRae.
I want to ensure that these programs, not just my program, but similar programs, it's crucial.
I don't think you have to be worried very much about that.
Really?
We have to do these things. It's no longer just a good idea. It's become more than just a good idea. It's become necessary to make changes that brings into the system the community side of healthcare.
Great.
So,
hey,
thanks, Anne.
we're not finished yet.
We're not done yet?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I'm just going to show you some pictures.
We're never done.
Over 50 years of service, but Anne Ross still has lots to do.
In one of my moments of self-doubt and search, I said to my husband, Bill, I said, you know, Bill, why am I doing this? Do you think it's to the glory of Anne Ross, to satisfy her superego? He looked at me in his quiet, reflective way, and he says, so, but you're doing good things for other people. Who cares how it affects you? You should look at the end product. Away we go! Away we go! We just keep going. We just keep going. They came to see the work I'm doing.
Hi. Hi, Sandra. How are you today?
Oh, not too bad. As far as you know, he's all right. Okay, we'll check his temperature and get the information. Then this will be his third, and then he'll, the next one we'll have him sneeze and taxi. Okay, and we'll give you a date to return. We'll just check him out to make sure there's no evidence. Okay?
Mount Carmel is a problem-solving center. It's a place where people come and they're treated with dignity.